Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has issued a stark warning to Lebanon, claiming the country could face a similar fate to Gaza if it continues to allow Hezbollah to operate within its borders. His statement came as the Israeli military intensified its offensive against Hezbollah along Lebanon's southern coastline, deploying additional troops and advising civilians to evacuate the region. In a direct video addressed to the Lebanese people, Netanyahu urged them to free their country from Hezbollah's grip to avoid further destruction. He said, "You have an opportunity to save Lebanon before it falls into the abyss of a long war that will lead to destruction and suffering like we see in Gaza." The warning was clear. Unless Hezbollah is dealt with, Lebanon risks enduring the same fate as Gaza, which has seen widespread devastation due to the ongoing conflict. Netanyahu stated, "I say to you, the people of Lebanon, free your country from Hezbollah so that this war can end." The conflict between Israel and Hezbollah escalated after the group claimed responsibility for firing rockets at the Israeli port city of Haifa. This attack came after the Israeli military reported that 85 projectiles had crossed the border from Lebanon into Israel. Hezbollah, which has shown no signs of letting up, threatened to continue firing on Israeli cities and towns if Israeli strikes on Lebanese population centers persisted. Netanyahu's warning that Lebanon could turn into another Gaza comes at a time when, according to the United Nations, 25% of Lebanon is under evacuation orders from the Israeli military. According to figures from the Lebanese government, almost 182,000 people are being housed in over 900 government shelters, and more than 750 of these are at full capacity. The Israel Defense Forces have just issued a new warning to people in southern Lebanon, telling them to be careful as troops are attacking targets in the region. An IDF spokesperson said, "For your own safety, you are prohibited from returning to your homes until further notice. Anyone who heads south is putting their life in danger." Israel has already issued evacuation orders to more than 100 villages and neighborhoods across southern Lebanon, with 1/4 of Lebanese territory now under Israeli military displacement orders. Around 1.2 million people have been internally displaced in Lebanon since Israel began intense airstrikes last month. In capital Beirut, people are sleeping on the streets, beaches, and the main martyrs square. More than 400,000 people, most of them Syrians, have fled into neighboring Syria. Israel says it has hit 185 Hezbollah sites in the past 24 hours. During the on-the-ground fighting, an Israeli commander was killed in an exchange of fire. Israel has also said that the Haifa area in its territory has been hit by rockets again today, marking the third consecutive day of attacks on Israel's third largest city. Haifa has a population of about 250,000. It was hit on Monday for the first time in 18 years. The conflict between Israel and Hezbollah has been simmering since 7th October 2023, when Hamas launched a devastating attack on Israel, killing over 1,000 civilians. Since then, Hezbollah, a key ally of Hamas, has engaged in sporadic exchanges of fire with Israeli forces. Israel, meanwhile, has vowed to secure its northern border and protect its citizens from Hezbollah's rocket attacks. Hezbollah's leadership has faced major setbacks in recent weeks. In late September, Israel killed its leader, Hassan Nasrallah, in an airstrike on Beirut. Nasrallah had led Hezbollah since 1992 and was widely considered one of the most powerful figures in Lebanon. His death marked a blow to the group, but Israeli strikes did not stop there. In October, Israel launched another bombing campaign in Beirut, targeting Hasham Saifuddin, a senior Hezbollah figure widely believed to be Nasrallah's successor. While Hezbollah has not confirmed Saifuddin's death, Netanyahu seemed to suggest in his video address that both Nasrallah and Saifuddin had been killed. In that address, Netanyahu said Israel has degraded Hezbollah's capabilities. He said, "We took out thousands of terrorists, including longtime Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah himself, and Nasrallah's replacement and his replacement's replacement," thereby suggesting that Nasrallah's multiple potential successors have been taken out. Having already targeted strongholds in southern and eastern Lebanon, Israel's latest moves signal a shift towards the coastal areas, with civilians being urged to evacuate. The Israeli Defense Forces have not spared capital Beirut, with strikes targeting Hezbollah's stronghold in the southern suburbs of the city. This area is a key base of operations for Hezbollah. Israel has since dismantled Hezbollah tunnels leading into Israeli territory. Despite these crippling losses, Hezbollah remains defiant. Its deputy leader, Naim Qassem, has declared that the group's military capabilities are intact and that they are prepared for a protracted conflict. Qassem's statement came even as Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant described Hezbollah as a broken organization whose leadership had been decimated following the elimination of Hassan Nasrallah. Gallant claims that Hezbollah's command structure is in disarray and the group lacks leadership following the death of Nasrallah and other key figures. He's also described Hezbollah's firepower capabilities as significantly diminished thanks to Israel's focused military campaign. However, Hezbollah continues to maintain its presence along the Lebanese border. Israel has accused Hezbollah of using civilian areas as shields for their military operations. Hezbollah, in turn, has pointed to the heavy civilian toll in Gaza as evidence of Israel's indiscriminate use of force. Of course, this conflict is not limited to Israel and Hezbollah. The group is widely believed to be backed by Iran, which supplies it with weapons, funding and political support. Israeli forces have clashed with Iran-backed militias across the region, including in Syria and Yemen. Just this week, an Israeli airstrike in Damascus targeted a building used by Iran's Revolutionary Guards and Hezbollah, killing 7 civilians. Tehran has long been a key backer of Hezbollah. In recent weeks, however, there have been reports that Iran may be seeking a ceasefire in Lebanon, possibly as a result of Hezbollah's mounting losses. Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi visited Beirut last Friday, voicing support for a ceasefire but insisted that any agreement would have to be backed by Hezbollah. More than 2,000 people have been killed across Lebanon in the past year. A country already exhausted by years of crises is now under even more pressure. In a significant shift in stance, Hezbollah is no longer demanding a truce in Gaza as a condition for reaching a ceasefire in Lebanon, rowing back from an oft-repeated promise to keep fighting until Israel halts its offensive against Hamas. Even as Netanyahu warns Lebanon of destruction like Gaza and tells the Lebanese people to free their country from Hezbollah, is it that simple? There is a long history of Israeli violence in Lebanon, and resentment and suspicion run deep. And no matter the scale of the damage that Israel manages to inflict on Hezbollah, the group will not be entirely destroyed, say experts. In Lebanon, Hezbollah is more than a militia. It's a political party with representation in the Lebanese parliament and a social movement with significant support. Experts say Israel may be able to weaken the group, but its ideology will persist as it did after wars of the past. In the long term, there is a real risk that Hezbollah supporters, feeling humiliated, may become more radicalized and isolated. This could exacerbate tensions in Lebanon, which endured a civil war between 1975 and 1990. For many Lebanese people listening to the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's speech last night, the threat is clear and the options are both extremely grim. Either face the fate of Gaza or be drawn into civil war. The idea of the Lebanese rising up against Hezbollah is recurrent in speeches made by Israeli leaders. It plays on the deep divisions in the country between pro- and anti-Hezbollah groups. But even for the harshest opponents of Hezbollah internally, such calls seem ominous. What does rising against Hezbollah really mean? There are many groups who publicly and ferociously oppose Hezbollah. This is part of the ongoing political debate in Lebanon. But for people opposed to Hezbollah, to take any action against the group can only mean bloody confrontations between the people of the same country. This translates into yet another civil war for a country that is still reeling from the last one, which, as we said, lasted for 15 years between 1975 and 1990. For many in Lebanon today, hearing Netanyahu's speech, the choices are between the worst and the worst. So what are we likely to see next? Is there going to be a ceasefire anytime soon? From an Israeli perspective, there is no incentive for a ceasefire. Its campaign has been extremely successful in degrading Hezbollah, and it is very likely that Israeli military officials believe it is time to continue and expand this offensive, not to stop. Meanwhile, an Israeli airstrike targeted a residential building in the Meza suburb west of the Syrian capital Damascus, killing 7 civilians, including women and children, and injuring 11 others. Israel has been carrying out strikes against Iran-linked targets in Syria for years, but has ramped up such raids since last year's October 7 attacks by Hamas on Israeli territory. And let's not forget, the Gaza War has gone on for a year now. Fighting continues in Gaza, including in Jabalia in the north, where Israeli tanks and troops are carrying out a ground operation. The Hamas-run health ministry in Gaza says more than 42,000 Palestinians have been killed in Israel's military offensive since it began a year ago. Israel has issued evacuation order to people in northern Gaza, but the United Nations says 400,000 people are trapped there, where there is no end to hell and hunger is spreading. The humanitarian crisis in Gaza is dire, with nearly all of the 2.4 million residents displaced at least once due to the ongoing Israeli bombardment. And then there is this fear over what Israel may do next in retaliation for the Iranian missile attack on its territory. It is expected that US President Joe Biden will speak to Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu tonight, as Washington appears to be trying to limit Israel's response to Iran's missile attack last week. The Middle East has been on edge since the attack, in which Iran fired nearly 200 ballistic missiles at Israel. While the US has defended the right of its close ally Israel to retaliate, it's also sent the message that Israel should not hit Iran's nuclear or oil production sites. It is understood that President Biden and Prime Minister Netanyahu haven't spoken directly for several weeks, with suggestions that the two leaders' relationship has become increasingly testy and mistrustful. Differences have emerged over Israel's conduct of its year-long war against Hamas in Gaza, and there appear to be growing concerns in Washington that fighting against Hezbollah in Lebanon may also turn out to be wider in scale and more prolonged than expected.
Smoke rose over Lebanon on Wednesday as the cross-border conflict between Hezbollah militants and Israel continued. Sirens sounded as Israel's overnight airstrikes on Lebanon's Beirut reduced some buildings to rubble, while explosions rang out in a southern Lebanese town. Meanwhile, Hezbollah said it targeted Israeli troops near the border with artillery shells and rockets. The Iran-backed movement, which had been launching rockets against Israel in solidarity with Gaza, said it pushed Israeli troops back and managed to prevent them from holding territory in Lebanon. The conflict has escalated dramatically in recent weeks. Israel has carried out a series of assassinations of top Hezbollah leaders, and after launching ground operations, Israeli troops are now clashing with militants on the ground. It's raised fears that both Iran and Israel's superpower ally, the US, could be sucked into the conflict. Israel's bombardment of Lebanon has killed more than 2,100 people, most of them in the last 2 weeks. It has forced 1.2 million people from their homes. Israel says it has no choice but to strike Hezbollah so that tens of thousands of Israelis can return to homes they fled under rocket fire.
This is a message to the people of Lebanon. Do you remember when your country was called the Pearl of the Middle East? I do. So what happened to Lebanon? A gang of tyrants and terrorists destroyed it. That's what happened. Lebanon was once known for its tolerance, for its beauty. Today, it's a place of chaos, a place of war. Israel withdrew from Lebanon 25 years ago. But the country that actually conquered Lebanon is not Israel. It's Iran. Iran, which finances and arms Hezbollah to serve Iran's interests at Lebanon's expense. Hezbollah has turned Lebanon into a stockpile of ammunition and weapons and a forward Iranian military base. Just one day after the October 7th massacre a year ago, Hezbollah joined the war against Israel. It launched an unprovoked attack on our cities and on our citizens. It has since fired over 8,000 missiles at Israel, killing civilians without distinctions, Jews, Christians, Muslims, and Druze. Israel has decided to put an end to this. We've decided to do whatever is necessary to return our people safely to their homes. Israel has a right to defend itself. Israel also has a right to win, and Israel will win. We've degraded Hezbollah's capabilities. We took out thousands of terrorists, including Nasrallah himself, and Nasrallah's replacement, and the replacement of his replacement. Today, Hezbollah is weaker than it's been for many, many years. Now you, the Lebanese people, you stand at a significant crossroads.